Top 10 Craziest 90-Day Fiancé Fights. 90 Day Fiancé is a reality television series that follows couples who have applied for or received a K-1 visa and therefore have 90 days to make up their minds for marriage. The show often witnesses some entertaining moments, like couple fights. Let's take a look at some.
You used me! You told me what I wanted to hear to get me to pull that annulment!
Keep watching right up to number 1 for your daily dose of drama. Before proceeding, be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon to receive notifications for all future videos. And now, let's get started. 10. Chantelle and Pedro. Chantelle had invited Pedro and his sister Nicole to her family's place for dinner in hopes of being able to bring their families close together. She had also filled them in about how Nicole had acted out the previous day when she had left for work. Chantelle's family was at the dinner table waiting for Pedro and Nicole, who showed up shortly after. Pedro was nervous since his encounters with Chantelle's family had not been great earlier, and while Nicole praised Karen, Chantelle's mother, for her cooking, slowly the topic got diverted, and Karen asked her about how Nicole's relationship with Chantelle was back at the apartment. On being confronted, Nicole got defensive, and they started arguing about who was telling the truth and who was lying. Soon, a physical fight broke out between River, Chantelle's brother, and Pedro when they started abusing and throwing hands at each other. The action was so intense that the crew had to step in and pull the two apart. Sometimes people decide to get married in a hurry, but when reality hits, they regret it. Watch this. 9. Molly and Louis. Louis met Molly in the Dominican Republic, and then he flew out to the States since the two wanted to marry each other. On this episode, Molly tells the viewers what happened after the argument she had with Louis when she returned from her business trip. On the very next day of the argument, Louis started acting weird. He went to the guest bedroom and started blasting songs on Molly's speakers. Molly went and asked him to turn down the volume more than once, but the fight quickly escalated.
Off my speaker. Just turn the speaker off and I'll go. I'm not.
And verbal communication turned to physical action. Louis went to grab the phone from her room to call 911 because Molly was pushing him and caught him in a doorway. Molly's kid was back, and she thought a scene like this would not be a good influence on her child. She thought that the better solution would be to just take her child to her friend's place, and she soon left. Coming back the following day, she found her house empty, and Louis had gone away with all of his belongings. When Molly called him, he said that he had no intention of talking to her. Later, Molly was seen regretting making the efforts for his visa process. She said that had she known Louis was going to change after coming to the States, she would have never decided to take things so far. Up next, a couple can cope with things together until one of their families gets involved. 8. Larisa and Colt. This episode revolves around Larisa and Colt. John, Colt's cousin, comes in with a family for a barbecue, and the tension initially starts when Larisa thinks of interacting with him since they were going to be a family. But John doesn't even acknowledge her. John sits down with Colt and Larisa and asks them what they're planning and how things were going between them. At this, Larisa informs him that they hadn't decided what they would do with Debbie, Colt's mother, since she and Larisa didn't get along much. John took this as a sign that Larisa was trying to break up the family. He got offended and said that he'd be happy to keep his aunt at his place rather than have her out on the streets. This sparked an argument which heated up when John claimed that Larisa and Colt's relationship was fake. He further claimed that Larisa was using Colt for benefits. Not long after, Larisa started shouting that John would not be invited to her wedding, and this went on until Larisa stormed off upstairs and John left with his family, irritated about how things were getting broken.
Don't come to my wedding. Don't come to my wedding.
No, I don't care to come to your wedding. I hope that I'm working or something. I swear to God.
And now watch how being from different worlds can eventually get in the way of a couple's chemistry. 7. Danielle and Mohamed. Although they had many fights over the stipulated 90 days, this one was the most explosive. It started pretty normally with Danielle and Mohamed separately talking about how toxic the relationship had become. Mohamed was very troubled because of how Danielle acted now and then, and he also said that he had to put up with a lot of craziness because he had no other option at that point. Danielle, on the other hand, was hell-bent on sending Mohamed back and believed that he had used her to get to the States. She also agreed that her friends had often told her that their marriage would not work out because of their religious differences. Shortly after, Danielle reached Mohamed's house and told him that she filed for an annulment to be able to deport him because she felt that she was being used. Danielle started shouting at him, and the situation got so out of hand that Mohamed had to call the cops. Danielle said it straight that she wanted Mohamed to be deported since he didn't respect her and had toyed with her emotions when she loved him and wanted their marriage to work. Up next, how little things can get annoying enough to spark a huge fight. 6. Jessy and Darcy. In this episode, Jessy and Darcy were together at a family dinner so that Jessy could bond better with Darcy's daughters. The tension starts rising between the two while cutting the steak. Darcy tells Jessy how he should cut the pieces so that they stay juicy. This sometimes annoys Jessy so much that he storms out of the house and sits on the porch while Darcy preps the meal and comes to calm him. Since she had her daughters around, she didn't want to turn the heat up in the situation at that moment. She shortly sends her daughters to call Jessy in for dinner, and they agree that he was passive-aggressive at the time, and all that their mother wanted to do was protect them. The next day, another fight started where Jessy claims that Darcy had thrown a pair of shoes at him. Darcy, in response, said that she was just throwing it towards the bag. Jessy felt that this was very irresponsible of her and that she'd wanted to hurt him. He soon left the house, saying that it was for his safety and better for the two. 90 Day Fiancé often witnesses opposition to the involved couples getting married, and more often than not, this opposition comes from the children of one of the partners. Have a look. 5. Ashley and David. David sat down to talk with his children about his decision to marry Annie. Little did he know that the dinner would take a highly unpleasant turn. Ashley, David's daughter, did not approve of his idea to get married again so soon. She was much more concerned about how David should be a better father and a better grandfather since he didn't even know her children. She said that David and Annie's marriage was not important and that it didn't matter to her or her brother, at which point David asked her to leave as she stormed right out after throwing water at him. Jacob, David's son, on the other hand, tried to cool the situation down but was not able to do so since Ashley was not pleased with her father's decision. She wanted him to focus on his family instead of bringing along another bride. Up next, jealousy is a dangerous thing. 4. Fernanda and Jonathan. Jonathan and Fernanda had been out clubbing where a scene blew out. Things got so out of hand that the authorities had to check in on them to see if it was all fine. Fernanda was out at a club with Jonathan, and when she went for a break, she came back to find Jonathan talking and dancing with another girl. Fernanda was so infuriated that she hurled a glass on the dance floor, and while Jonathan pushed the girl aside, Fernanda walked right out. Jonathan chased after her and tried to convince her that he'd been trying to ask the woman to leave, but she insisted on dancing. But out in the lot, Fernanda screamed at him for the keys and said that she didn't trust him. The ruckus was so loud that eventually the authorities had to drive by to see if everything was okay. And now watch how cultural differences can play the barrier between lovers. 3. Nicole and Azam. Nicole had flown to Morocco to be with her fiancé, Azam, but somehow she was not able to adapt to his culture that well. Azam had taken Nicole out to a market. The two were walking and they came across a put-up shop where Nicole found something nice, and while Azam paid for it, when she tried hugging him to thank him, Azam pushed her away, saying that it wasn't acceptable to hug in public in Morocco. Nicole didn't like this, and instead of trying to respect something his religion doesn't promote, Nicole thought Azam was at fault. On the way back, she confronted Azam, saying that she didn't think she'd done anything wrong since she wasn't touching him inappropriately. Up next, another instance of cultural differences gone wrong. 2. Lauren and Alexei. Lauren had flown to Israel to get married to Alexei, but at that point, both were exhausted and frustrated about the wedding because everything was falling apart. According to Alexei's traditions, the bride wasn't supposed to be out before the marriage, and thus, he kept asking Lauren to go up to the room. But she kept pushing it aside, asking him to get pictures taken. Eventually, she started feeling like Alexei was nagging her. Well, Alexei agrees to get pictures done as Lauren wanted. As they move upstairs, discussing about how everything is mismanaged sparks up. Alexei was already feeling guilty for not being able to arrange seating for all of the guests, but when Lauren dumped every unorganized thing on him, he started feeling irritated for getting blamed. The two then went to a room where they tried talking, but Alexei thought that Lauren had cold feet when all she was worried about was getting married without any more problems. I saved the best for last, but first I have a quick challenge that takes only 5 seconds to complete. So if you can leave a like and subscribe within the next 5 seconds, you'll get 10 years of amazing luck. Just try it. It really works. 1. Evelyn and David. The clip starts when the two are at the store, discussing what Evelyn refers to as the tuxedo situation. Evelyn had already planned on how she wanted everything at her wedding, and now, just 90 days before the big day, David shows up and started giving his opinions. This certainly put Evelyn in a bad mood. The two discussed groomsmen, where they hadn't decided what was going to be put down as the theme, and to anything David said, Evelyn would say they'd figure it out later. Evelyn was worried that these little things could trigger fights between them. Knowing what they had in store for the future was only scaring her more. David said that he thought she would act calmly and know the challenges to be faced when she was marrying a man with a different background. He also pointed out that he was going to leave his family and friends behind to adjust with her. At this, Evelyn got irritated and remarked that they were in America and that she was trying to meet him halfway. Which of these fights do you think was the most explosive? Do let us know in the comments section below. Until next time, take care, thanks for watching, and have an excellent day.